All
Push
in.
to talk, the green.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kevin McDonough. Today is the 11th of September. The time is 1:04, and this is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Lackawanna Redevelopment Authority of Lackawanna County. Start the meeting, I'd like to have us all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. With all the cheers. All right, in attendance, we have Aaron Whitney, Jack McNulty, myself, and Tim O'Brien is scheduled to appear, so we'll give him a little bit of time. We also have with us our acting director, Krista McNada, and our consultant, Joe Moskowitz. And we also have, not everyone is aware of this, but we also have Dave Bolzoni, our Chief Financial Officer, I believe your title is. And he's going to make a short presentation to the board to help, well, he can discuss it. I'm not going to get into the parameters, okay? There is no one here from the public. Oh, I'm looking right at you, Ralph, and we have Ralph Pappas here as our backbone. With that, as I said, there's no one here from the public to speak, so we're going to move along to the meeting minutes from our last meeting of June 12th, and that was also an in-person meeting, was it not? That was, okay, all right. Can I ask for a motion to accept them? Second? Second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. The presentation of the vouchers, our expenditures for the, no, so we have nothing? So we're clear. We can move right on. We can discuss Joe at this time, but let's, how about we move on to Dave Bolzoni and let him give his presentation, and then we'll go from there with our regular meeting. So Dave, do you want to come up? I'm going to turn off, you turn on.
Okay. Most of what I'm going to talk about is really a very recent development, so I didn't come prepared with an actual formal presentation. This mainly was a result of discussions that occurred over the past few days. So as everyone at the table is aware, the county has had some relatively acute financial issues to contend with this year, but this is an ongoing process. The county had engaged Public Financial Management as part of the Commonwealth's Strategic Management Planning Program to come in and prepare a report, which is both fiscal and operational. So they're working on the operational side. The fiscal side basically provides a forecast, and it shows here's how much money you have, here's how much money you're going to need to run the county for this year, and here's where you're going to be deficient. So that number is, and it's varied based on updates throughout the year. But that number right now approximates around $10 million. So the county has a gap of $10 million that it is going to need to satisfy prior to year end or run out of money. That's basically what the options are, and they're not. The option is certainly not a favorable one. We were in that same position last year. The county started holding bills in August and September of last year. A lot of people were not getting paid. We're not going through that process again this year. It's certainly not favorable for the county, as well as a lot of interrelated factors, such as the county's debt rating, which was decreased twice within the last year. That's certainly not favorable either. So what comes out of this is how can we secure funding in order to cover that prospective deficit? Now, the borrowing option is probably the most favorable option. It's probably the only option, really, at this point. Not that there's a lot of enthusiasm to issue additional debt, but at this point, the solutions are few. This is one that I think probably has merit in order to meet whatever that issue is and create the appropriate solution. So that's what we're taking a look at. Now, as you're well aware, because we approached the Redevelopment Authority a year plus ago for what amounted to another form of borrowing which plugged a gap in the county's budget, that was the sale of delinquent tax liens. That's worked out extremely well. It's had no real impact on the county or on the Redevelopment Authority. What we're looking at now is there are actually two options. If you're looking at borrowing money for operations, and that's really what this would be, there's little latitude that's provided by the state relative to the way the county would borrow. Most of the debt that's issued by any government unit is for capital purposes. There are very few options that are available to any government unit, any county, to borrow for operations. You can issue a tax and revenue anticipation note. That's borrowed for operations. But that has to be paid back within a year. So we did a $15.5 million tax anticipation note this year. That's got to be paid off by December 31st. So you can't do that because if you don't have any money at the end of the year, you're not going to be able to pay that back anyway. So that takes that off the table. There's also what's called the unfunded debt transaction. And that's typically what's used for a government unit when they run into an issue such as what we're facing right now, and they need to borrow money in order to cover whatever that deficiency is within that budget year. That's what we're looking at. That's one option. Basically, there's several hurdles that have to occur in order to get to a point where you can actually issue that debt. It's more time-consuming than the second option that I'm going to outline to you. And the reason for that is because not only does it require the standard debt ordinance adoption process, but it also requires court approval. The biggest issue we have right now is time. Normally it takes 90 days to get through any debt issue. Never mind having to also add the court approval process onto it. So the alternative we looked at, which is option number 2, involves the Redevelopment Authority. Those solutions are in the form of the county selling a property to an authority and then leasing it back, or in the case that we're really looking at in this instance, leasing a property to the Redevelopment Authority and leasing it back. So how that would work is the county has a certain building or a certain piece of property that it will in turn lease to the Redevelopment Authority. The Redevelopment Authority issues the debt for the consummation of that lease. So if we're looking at $10 million, the lease cost, so to speak, for the lease of that property would be $10 million. So the county leases, and let's just say a park or a building, to the Redevelopment Authority. The Redevelopment Authority borrows $10 million in order to complete that lease. The Redevelopment Authority then leases it back to the county. The lease rentals, the payments the county would have to make on this lease back, match your debt service. So every time a debt service payment is required, it goes from the county directly to the lender. It doesn't involve the Redevelopment Authority at all. It's not like the lease rentals or the lease payments go to the Redevelopment Authority and you make the debt service payment. It's a process that really has very little intervention on the redevelopment authority side, much as was the case with the tax lien sale. This is very similar in the fact that it's basically a pass-through process for the redevelopment authority. It's not as though you have to maintain the property. Everything remains exactly as is. It's just a form of financial transaction. So as you had seen very recently, there were some draft documents that were forwarded. This discussion is very new, to the point where we've not gotten into the detail even with the commissioners at this point. But we also have to move it along. They're well aware of what options we're looking at. We just haven't talked about the real detail relative to how this would work. So we haven't identified the property yet. That's something we've got to do very shortly. But the difference is that this process is much more fluid in that the redevelopment authority is the borrower. It doesn't take an elaborate process in order for the redevelopment authority to issue debt. The county is a guarantor on that debt. Okay, and that's important for the redevelopment authority to understand as well. So you're leasing the property from the county, you're paying the county X number of dollars for the lease, the county's leasing it back, the county's guaranteeing that debt. That guarantee and those lease back payments actually match whatever that debt service requirement is. So when debt service is due, the county winds up making those payments. So the county's on the hook, basically, for whatever those payments are. The county, I'll subtract basically. The county is on the hook through its guarantee and also through the lease agreement. There really isn't any downside at all. You know, the downside is, do we really want to borrow money for operations? No. So that's the downside.
Downside to the authority.
Yeah, there is, right, there is no downside to the authority because the authority is really removed from the process. Again, you don't have responsibility for property maintenance or anything like that. You're leasing it from the county and then leasing it back. So everything relative to that piece of property remains exactly the same as it is right now. The authority is really just serving as a conduit for this entire borrowing process, much as you did with the sale of the delinquent tax liens. The authority was a conduit for the county to be able to acquire funds more efficiently than how it could otherwise through what might be considered more traditional means. So there really is no downside for the authority in this because it's a process that really segregates the authority's responsibility, and all of the responsibility relative to that transaction falls on the county's shoulders. We're guaranteeing it. The lease back requires lease rentals that the county would actually be making, and those lease rental payments would match whatever that debt service is. This is not something that we created just for this situation. I mean, this transaction has been used in a number of occasions, was used with the city of Scranton. You know, when I was there, you know, the city had gone through transactions like that as well. You know, throughout my 30 years in banking, we had used these transactions. So it's not common, only because generally you're going to use it when you have a situation where you've got budget issues. So it's not necessarily a common transaction, but it's also not really uncommon. It's used in cases where you've got, mainly because you have time constraints. And that's really what the issue is here. We're already into September. If you've got a 90-day process, minimally, in trying to advance the debt transaction, you're probably not going to have enough time to go through the court approval process. this transaction with the redevelopment authority is a little more time efficient. And right now, for us, that's important because the expectation is we're going to run out of money in November. So it's not as though going through a more lengthy transaction is going to satisfy any of the needs, because if you're going to run out of money in November and you can't close a loan until the end of December, it doesn't do anyone any good. So based on the number of conversations we had relative to the options, this is the most favorable option for the county. And, and again, it doesn't have any impact whatsoever on the redevelopment authority. And much as was the case with the tax lien sale, this is pretty similar. We're looking at a 10-year transaction, so it would have a 10-year amortization. The amortization would begin in 2025. We haven't really decided how we're going to amortize it. It might be semi-annual payments, but again, the payments go directly from the county to the lender. It's probably going to be a bank issue, a bank-issued note, mainly because you've got your choice between doing a bank loan or a bond issue. A bond issue can be very time-consuming and is not necessarily favorable to the county at this point, given the fact that the county just had its debt rating downgraded twice over the last year. So doing a bond issue is probably not the smartest thing to do. Better off negotiating a transaction out with banks. So we've already had our financial advisor polling a handful of banks to see who might be interested in the transaction. We did have a response that it may wind up being a lead bank with a consortium, which would include 4 other banks participating in the transaction, which would be favorable. But it also gives us the ability to negotiate what we think are favorable terms, as opposed to going to the bond market where your bond underwriter basically gives you what those terms are. So, you know, the advantage in the bond market generally is you usually get a better yield, or in this case, a better rate of interest on the debt. But, you know, it comes with the downside, and that's certainly not guaranteed after you've had downgrades in your debt rating anyway. So I think we're going to approach it where we're probably going to negotiate the transaction out with a bank or a number of banks, and the debt will wind up being issued to a bank, which would be basically the same process that occurred with the tax lien sale, where that was done with a bank as well. It would be in the redevelopment authority's name, right? So you'd be issuing the note. But again, the note is being supported by revenues that would come from the county. And that's part of the sublease agreement, but it's also part of the guarantee that would be formally approved through a county ordinance. So the county's guaranteeing that debt through a formal legal process. It would be the county's ordinance that's being passed in order to formalize that process. They were, right, both of you. It was really just a draft at that point of the authority's resolution and the county ordinance that I sent. I think there were some documents that might have been circulated today as well that I didn't see yet. Thoughts, comments? That's a synopsis as to what it's all about. Now, what would have to occur is the timing of this is such where the authority would have to hold a special meeting sometime the first week of October to approve that resolution. At that meeting, Brian Kosolansky from Stevens & Lee, who is note or bond counsel for the county on the transaction, will be there. He can answer more detailed legal questions that you might have. Scott Shearer and or Melissa Hughes from PFM, who are financial advisors, will be there as well. So I'm giving you my perspective on how it works only because I've done this stuff for 30 years. So I understand how it works. Otherwise, the county's chief financial officer isn't going to be sitting here explaining how to do a debt transaction. It's only because I've done them before that I'm sitting here. But the fact that you had a meeting, I wanted to get in front of you. I mean, it was timely and coincidental that we just had this discussion 2 days ago on having it take shape, and you have a meeting today. So I figured I'll get out in front of you just to let you know what's coming down the road and to at least request that you schedule the special meeting first week of October. A lot more information is going to come, and again, a lot more detail would be available, not only through the documentation that's going to be provided, but also in person at the special meeting. You'd have both of those individuals there to be able to answer any more specific questions. But if you have any questions, feel free to share. If I can't answer them, I'll get answers from the other parties.
Just a quick question. Dave, is there any merit in having those financial advisors on this as an option? Talk with the board, even, I don't know, even if it would be virtually prior to having the October meeting for the vote?
Absolutely.
I'm just wondering if then it gives people time to consider it, ask some questions, as opposed to asking some questions and then having to have an immediate vote on it. So just thoughts, throwing that out there.
I'll leave that entirely up to you. If you want to schedule something where they can make a presentation on some of the specifics relative to the transaction, absolutely. They'd be more than happy to do that.
I think what Kim said has merit, and that we should have something that, some type of a slideshow or something,
Right.
A whiteboard, and they can, explain to us exactly how this breaks out. And like I said, so that we're not walking into this, the date was October 9th. What is that, the next commissioners meeting? I saw something with October 9th on it.
Yeah, I think that might have been the initial reading for the,
Okay, I'm just, so that, Kim said, so that we're not sitting here the morning of and like questioning.
Yeah, that was
financial.
my thoughts,
If we could do
exactly.
a Zoom meeting that we could get set up, right?
I think that's a good idea. Again, if this discussion didn't start to solidify within the last couple of days, sure, everyone would be here and you'd have a presentation explaining exactly what this is all about. But the fact is, it just really started to take shape within the last 2 days. So I thought it'd be advantageous to at least introduce it to you, again, to let you know what's coming. And anything that's needed by the Redevelopment Authority in order to be able to back up this discussion absolutely can be accommodated. You would have information that would be a bit more formal explaining the process. That would probably be addressed by our financial advisor. And then, of course, Attorney Kosolansky, who's done a number of these transactions as well, can answer any of the legal questions for the authority. So all this is an introduction. This wasn't really designed to be able to provide you with the amount of detail you would need. Again, we don't even know at this point which property we're looking at for the leaseback, but it did give me an opportunity to get in front of you just to give you an introduction as to what this is all about and what we're looking at trying to accomplish and the reason why.
We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
And just for clarity, it looks like the actual commissioners' public meetings in October are the first week, October 2nd, and then the next one is the 16th. So if we were to call a meeting on the first week of October, then we would put it on the next week's work session to then bring it to the commissioners' meeting on the 16th. Is that what you're thinking?
Right, we're going to introduce it. I think the commissioners' work session is on the 25th, so it's going to go to the work session the last week of September. First reading is going to be on the second reading, which would be final approval by the board, would be on the 14th. Within that process, within that time frame, the authority would have to meet in order to approve the resolution, because the resolution would be part of the transaction documentation.
So we'll have something prior to that resolution being drawn up.
Just let me know what you have in mind. I'll pass that along to our financial advisor and Attorney Koselansky, and we can work on getting something scheduled where they can get in front of you and give you maybe a little more detail than I provided.
Thanks so much, Dave.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that would be a Zoom meeting. You all right with a Zoom, or do you want to come here? I mean, it's a walk for you.
No, either way works for me.
The, since Jack, why don't we just do an in-person meeting, you know? Yeah, because Jack likes to be in person.
I'm with you, Jack.
Yes, and it's just a walk for you, a quick run over for me.
Yeah, just give us some dates, and you know, we'll pass them along. And you know, Tim O'Brien's also familiar with these types of transactions. He's done them from a banking perspective as well. So you know, it's not a concept that's foreign to him.
No. Okay,
Okay.
thank you, David.
All right. Do you need me here for anything else?
No,
Okay. Thanks. All right. Have a good day, everyone.
You too.
okay, now we're going to have Joe talk a little bit. I had mentioned the commissioners, and I think you saw where Brian was here. And it's on their calendars to stop in. So, I was assured that somebody would be stopping in and sticking their head in the door. Maybe they already did and left. A little hit and run. All right, Joe.
Thank you, Kevin. Real quickly, this is my first opportunity at a formal meeting to thank this board for, at the June meeting, you approved the advisory agreement between the board and myself, allowing me to come on board and the opportunity to serve this board and the county, the Community and Economic Development Office. Clearly from, before I get into, obviously the presentation by Mr. Bolzoni is very interesting. It shows the situation the county is in, and I think it relates directly to us, to this board, in that I think we can be part of a long-term solution for county financing through economic development. But before I do that, I also, in addition to thanking the board and the kind words that were expressed at the board at that meeting, I was very grateful for that. It's very rewarding after 30, 40-year career in this business to have this board, which, by the way, I'm excited to work with this board. It's a very seasoned board with business people, finance. We have the chamber represented here, and labor is well represented here. And I think we need all of those components at the table if we're going to design projects that move this county forward. So this board, I believe, is in a unique position to help the commissioners move their economic agenda forward. And again, I have to thank Kristen McNatt and Ralph Pappas for their work. Kristen wears so many hats, it's hard, as does Ralph. It's hard to kind of name them all. And I'm pleased to see that on the agenda today is a resolution concerning Ms. McNatt. So again, I had no idea that Mr. Bolzoni would be here to make his brief introduction presentation, because it's not a presentation yet. It's just a notification that the county has a serious hole in their budget, as we well know. And I think in many ways, not to wax on too much with this, but this is where these intersections of these public boards, we're a public board and we operate on our own, but you can see how the association with the county is integral. And this is what we can do. And Kevin, you had mentioned at previous meetings, this authority has been far more active in the past And I believe the commissioners are interested in this board and authority to again step up and be more active now. And I believe that's why I was brought on to do this. So one other thing I would say is I'd like to relate to the board that Kristen and her staff took the time to meet with me. And I think you all know that Kristen's staff is our staff. That's the staff that we have. Kevin had mentioned in the past, the authority had its own staff. It does not, okay? The Community Development Office is our staff. And I'm very happy to report that I know from my experience, the staff is very qualified, does great work, and it's one of the reasons that gives us all confidence that we can push this pebble up the hill. So having said that, I'd like to suggest to the board that we can basically look at, excuse me, we can basically look at the road ahead in, I think, two ways that are both related. And that would be in terms of large transformational projects and smaller projects that impact more local municipal issues. Just as an example, a large project would be some of the conversations, excuse me, I apologize, some of the conversations about Montage Mountain. The Community Development Office is currently in the process of doing an economic impact study at the mountain. And those of us who have been around a while can remember that prior to 1980, there was nothing on that mountain, okay? And because of county leadership, Montage Mountain was developed, and we all know the jewel that Montage Mountain is. However, I think we can also agree that at this point in time, the mountain might need a little refurbishing, revitalization. And if I can take the opportunity, and I don't mean to burden you with this, but real quickly, let me read the introduction of the legislation from Harrisburg that provides the impetus for what this redevelopment authority is formed to promote. And according to their language, according to the language in the legislation, this, under urban redevelopment law, Katie, under urban redevelopment law, our mission here is to promote, and this is a quote, to promote the elimination of blighted areas, supply sanitary housing in areas throughout the Commonwealth by declaring acquisitions, sound replanning, and redevelopment of such areas to be for the promotion of health, safety, convention, and welfare, creating public bodies, corporate and politic, to be known as redevelopment authorities, authorizing them to engage in the elimination of blighted areas, and so on. So I read that to you because although our focus, our mission is narrow in some ways, in that we're a redevelopment authority, we're not the county commissioners, we're the redevelopment authority, but you can see that the work we do here can touch many aspects of life throughout our county and affect many stakeholders in the county. So the work we do here can influence and perhaps because of the nature of this board and the fine leadership we have on the board and the relationship that we have with the majority county commissioners, excuse me, that we can do some projects here that will help move the county forward. So again, I mentioned that a large-scale project would be one like the Montage Mountain project that's proposed. And we can't forget here the significant investment the county has in the mountain already between the Performing Arts Center and the stadium. So the county is already greatly invested in the future of the mountain. And I believe that with a revitalization effort with the mountain, we can see similar kinds of additional development up there as we had when the mountain was first developed some 40 years ago. And I think that would be an exciting thing, and I think we're at a crossroads in time. And our new young leadership, of which I can only envy. I wish I had 30 more years to do this. But we have new young leadership that can provide us a pathway into the future. And so I think with great confidence we say that by bringing me on board, there's no silver bullet. I can't provide the authority with all the answers, just as Mr. Bolzoni, which I have to note that I've worked with Mr. Bolzoni for about 30 years of when he was a government banker, and Mr. Bolzoni, I can tell you, and you know this, is certainly the most decorated government financial expert we have in our area. The county is lucky to have Dave on board, as was the city of Scranton, where he helped remove distressed city status from the city after decades of distress. So Having said that, I believe that Dave, along with the commissioners, PFM, I've worked with Scott Shear at PFM, I've worked with Brian Kozlansky, they're the best that the Commonwealth has to offer. So we're in good hands when it comes to the professionals that we're going to use to help us get through this. And I assume that we will help the county, this board will help the county in plugging that financial hole. It'll depend on the information that PFM and Dave are able to provide the board. But knowing them, I know they will come up with a viable solution. And although it's not in our purview, clearly the fiscal problems of the county will not be resolved in this budget year or in 2025. But with David's shepherding of the financial process in the county, I'm pretty certain that over a few budget periods, the fiscal challenge that the county commissioners inherited for this year will be resolved. And so we have to continue our work, realizing that finances are going to be a problem moving forward. There's not a lot of money. But as the county struggles with finances, let me remind the board that Governor Shapiro's budget includes a number of funding priorities that this board can take advantage of.
How soon?
Soon, we
Let's
hope.
get going.
So, well, quite honestly, well, Kev, I have met with elected officials, but as David said, these things take time. That's part of the challenge that you have, to think there's a silver bullet, because when it comes to economic development, there's no silver bullet and there's no one size fits all. It's all customization. And in the governor's program are Main Street Matters money, okay? And I think we want to look at the main streets, and I've talked to Kristen and our commissioners about this, that we want to look at downtowns or main streets throughout the county, and there are a number of them. And I'm happy to report I've met with a number of officials from those municipalities, and many of them are already doing the things that they need to do to advance their communities, and we're not going to interfere with that. We encourage them to continue, and we're not going to do anything to interfere with projects that are already underway and plans that are already underway. But what I believe we can be helpful with is we can help fill some of those gaps to make those projects a reality. For example, and not to commit us to anything, because I cannot do that. My role here is an advisory role. But I know in talking with officials in Dunmore, okay, they have a fairly significant downtown revitalization plan. And it's done, excuse me, with DX Dempsey and Tom Riley, and it's been out on Facebook, so the community knows about this. But I know from the work that I did in Pittston with Mayor Lombardo that these processes are done over time, okay? That they're implemented piece by piece. And you actually build on the success of each piece to get to the next piece, okay? They don't happen in a vacuum. So you have to start somewhere. And so talking about the Dunmore revitalization plan, what I'm saying about that is that, well, it'll be millions of dollars, and they're going to get funding for that in pieces. They're not going to get $3 million to do a downtown plan, as Pittston did not, okay? But you can get parts of that funding at different times, and you need to be creative. And so let me say this, that what I noticed in contacting officials around the county, some of our municipalities have little or no staff to be able to implement some of these things. I see where in many of our municipalities, the mayor serves as the community development director. They don't have a community development office. And so if you want to implement these kinds of transformational plans, and that's what they are, they're transformational plans, generational change, that they need some resources. And I believe the county and this board in particular, by bringing me on board, even in a limited capacity, can help provide some of that technical assistance to those municipalities and see if we can't work with the county and Kristen's office, okay, to fill some of those gaps. They're already doing much of that. The county community development office is already involved with filling a lot of those gaps, and they've written several grants. And I don't have to tell this board, you're all experienced at this. Writing a grant is one thing, okay? That's not the hardest part of the process, though. The hardest part of the process is implementing it and administering it, It's not simple, okay? It may not be rocket science, but it's not simple. And to have experience in doing those sorts of programs is very helpful to the municipalities, I believe. So having said that, what I would hope is that this board will work with the commissioners in helping to form what I believe can be a strategic plan. Dave Bolzoni talked about how the county with PFM is looking at a strategic financial management plan so that they can avoid the shortfalls in budgeting for the future. I believe that we need a larger plan of that nature for economic development. And I would encourage the commissioners and this board, as part of that plan, to work with the various boards and authorities in the county and with the Greater Scranton Chamber. That would include the Industrial Development Board, the Industrial Development Authority, the Northeast Rail Authority, just to name a few. The Planning Commission, Lackawanna County Planning Commission, which as a redevelopment authority, we need our Planning Commission as a partner. They're part of a redevelopment plan. We won't be able to implement redevelopment plans if we don't have Lackawanna County Planning approve a redevelopment plan that we would submit to them. And I want to remind this board that part of the blight remediation process includes vacant property. And we all know that there are many vacant properties throughout the county, some damaged by our mining heritage, okay? Others that have just been let to degenerate, okay, where they pose health and safety issues for their communities. And I think we can play a role in trying to address some of those problems with those municipalities. We cannot solve those problems for them, but I think we can be part of that gap that helps them get over the line with identifying and implementing economic development programs, revitalization efforts that will lift all boats. So the last thing I'll say about that is that Dave clearly identified financial problems that the county is having. And I strongly believe that one of the answers to the county's financial distress is to expand the pie. That we need to improve areas that are underdeveloped, and we need to improve revenue generation for the county in a reasonable way through new development. And by therefore expanding the revenues to the county so they can address the incredible needs that the county has. And I think the county is in good position to take advantage of these things. And I think we have good leadership at all levels. And I would suggest to this board that we can be an active participant with the Community Development Office and the commissioners and our other board partners in moving an economic development strategy forward that benefits all of the stakeholders in our community. And I appreciate the opportunity that this board has given me to be part of that conversation.
Thank you. It's been a while since we had our meeting up in Dunmore. I believe we talked about this. We talked about getting somebody from this board, somebody from Planning Commission, somebody from the Land Bank. Didn't we talk about that? Or was that a dream on my part?
We did.
Well, we're pretty lucky because we have the land bank right at the table for us.
At the, and, because basically you'd be brainstorming, but, when Joe was talking about Montage Mountain, that's what brought me back to Scranton. I lived in King of Prussia at the time. I was sitting there reading the newspaper, and there in the Philadelphia Inquirer, in the Travel and Leisure, whatever section it was, there's a big article about this montage that Jay McNulty was spearheading up there, and I thought, what the? And I came back home. It's not like I wasn't coming back home. I came home and met with some people, and I wanted to be part of it. That's what I picked up what I had in King of Prussia and moved back. But and I do know that back at Montage right now, they're redoing with the dam. They're redesigning the dam for better flow and retention, whatever, and that will allow for the expansion of possibly another exit up there. Is that
Well,
part of it?
I'm happy to give a little bit of an update. So far through what will be a year process, we're just a few months into our study on Montage Mountain with ESI. And with that comes a lot of additional, engineers and partners that they bring on. And our most recent meeting, actually, I should say the most recent meetings that they've held were with some community partners. They're starting that outreach process, which was stated as a key part of that process, which is, meeting with businesses, homeowners, elected officials, the chamber, given the chamber's investment on that mountain for so long and up to just a few years ago, owned their own water company that supplied a lot of the properties up there. So, with all of the stakeholders, those meetings are, just starting to go underway. Yes, the Economic Development Department, through grant funding, one of the things that had to majorly be addressed is the fact that the number 5 dam, which actually serves the mountain, particularly higher up on the mountain, has not been had any work done on it since it was built in the early 1800s. So in order for there to be, for that dam to, number one, run at capacity and also run properly, and for us to have any other options for extending infrastructure, it was key that we addressed the dam, which the county owns. As far as the big question has been, both with our consultants as well as with, I think, anybody interested in any sort of economic development on the mountain, is how can we do any expansion or look forward to anything in the future if we are not addressing our traffic and egress issues. So I think that will continue to be very high on the list as in one of the things that are issues that our consultants will look to see if there are even any options up there. And if there are, I would go to say, without having any figures in front of me or engineering and design, that blasting through the rock up there, as you know, Aaron, is, and then trying to find an access road. The one that has been discussed would be about 7 miles and also would need a bridge built. So you're looking at a road that would really get utilized by a very small amount of vehicles, other than on a full mountain of events that could cost upwards of hundreds of millions of dollars. So I think we, in knowing that, and having multiple conversations, even at the state, at PennDOT, and level with the consultants, is that we have to identify if that is even a possibility, because would the juice be worth the squeeze? And the answer is unlikely. So then what do we do? Because we can't just stop and not fill the buildings that were very recently, before COVID, filled with individuals. So we can't just let it be like that. So we have a lot of faith in the consultants and them knowing that the ingress, egress, traffic, and the future, the sort of long-term wishful thinking thought would be, is there an opportunity for another access road, is definitely something that they're looking into for us. But I like to manage everybody's expectations on how possible something like that would be. And is there, in the meantime, something else we can do with, road widening, utilize a different way of the roads that are already there for ingress and egress, a traffic pattern going into the facilities as well as out of the facilities. So there are a lot of things that are being explored right now to be able to say there's still a lot of time. That mountain isn't finished. There's a lot of time and a lot of effort that needs to be put into business growth up there. But how do we address the things that are going to continue to be a hindrance if we don't touch them?
If I may. I was one of the original 5 that started Montage Mountain and hired Jack Sweeney. And we went to Duluth, Minnesota, where we were going to get a resort, recreation, baseball, and an arena. And for 5 years, we struggled with two people who had homes on the property illegally, hunting places. And then, you know, when the governor come up here in regards to putting a prison there, absent in hopes of getting what we ended up getting, you know, I testified about the prison because the prison was going to be massive. And who goes into a prison? Somebody else's kids, somebody else's husband, you know. And it was a job. They're all organized. It was good jobs and so forth. And that fell through the cracks. And we ended up, you know, unfortunately, we had a Marriott sign, which is now right outside of Harrisburg, and they couldn't wait any longer to come here, so we lost that. And eventually, you know, we got the ski area. And then I was president of Northeast Baseball, where we got a AA team, and then went to court and got a AAA team. So, you know, what's there, I played somewhat of a part in it. But the difficulty, as you expressed, and certainly you know better than most, we've got to get another way out of there. You know, the people that live up there, and God forbid something happens, ambulances can't get up there. I saw some people, you know, get hit with cars with the programs. But it was, you know, with Gilchrist, who was a dear friend of mine, who agreed to sell the land for basically nothing. But something has to be done to get people out of there.
Yeah, and that's our hopes, is that at the very end of this, you know, what we see is options and what price tag may be attached to all of these options. But if I may, I just want to, and Joe, thank you so much for all that you said, because as Joe is saying this, in my short amount of time with the county thus far, there's a lot to do. And Ralph, you know, doing the land bank as long as he has and doing it so well, we have that we're lucky to have that information and access to, you know, the repository and what blight is out there, and what lots are available, and as well as, you know, what hasn't been put in place yet, but again, through Ralph, always looking at options to bring in revenue, and whether these fall under the Economic Development Department or under the Land Bank. You know, there's an Act 152 that deals with both with just demolition, and an Act 149 that's for demo and rehab. Both of those of which, you know, Act 152 would go through the Recorder of Deeds, and 149 through Tax Office, I think. Ralph, Tax Assessor's Office. Yes. Yeah, with the fee on that. So again, those haven't yet been, we're working on putting that together and all the pieces in place, so then we can put a resolution in front of the commissioners and have that income or that revenue for both demo and also, you know, the other one for demo and rehab. So I think that's, again, trying to be proactive and find ways to have revenue to address some of the issues that you'd mentioned. And again, I think that also, again, intersects how so many departments in economic development and planning office intersect with all of the committees and authorities and boards that the county has. But just thought I would provide an update there.
Kristen, if I could respond to that briefly, I would say we have to, when we look at vehicles such as the land bank, I think what we need to keep in mind is that they're tools. They're not in themselves answers. They're tools to help us achieve our goals. The land bank is a tool to help us transition previously blighted properties back onto the tax rolls. So they're tools. If you had a blight board, it would be a tool. These are tools for the enforcement of the types of activities we want to have cleaned up in our neighborhoods. So again, they're tools. And so I appreciate what Kristen says about situating these, and Ralph does a great job. And I know when I was in the city of Princeton, we started a land bank, and so I'm familiar with the work that the land bank does. And it's difficult work, but the work that it does, and it doesn't compete with private industry, as many of our stakeholders worried that municipalities would purchase properties that otherwise could be developed by private contractors. The truth of it is most of those properties that Ralph deals with have sat there for decades in disrepair and have been nothing but a problem for their neighbors. So again, these are tools that the county utilizes to fight those challenges that the county confronts.
Going back to our conversation that we had in Dunmore, okay, I think we need to identify goals. I think that's, we can talk about tools, we can talk about different things, talk goals. And I think a good path to that is getting someone from the planning commission, getting someone from the different authorities, okay? Because, the county's in the predicament they're in right now. And one party's saying, we need to cut. We're not going to cut our way. I'm sorry to say, yeah, there's a lot of fat in the county. And I think anybody who works for the county knows that. But that's a drop in the bucket, okay? And as Joe's said over and over again, the only way that you're going to substantiate anything into this is development. We've got to, that's, the great words, grow our way out of it. I was down in Easton yesterday, and I've been going down there for 30-some odd years, down that way. And years ago, I used to say, when you would go down the turnpike and go towards Reading, it was for sale, for lease, for rent. When you went left, it was full. And now you go right, and all those signs are gone, and it's going out further west. And when you come east and north, all up through that corridor, it's just all development. Every last piece of it is development. And sorry to say, there's no more farming out there, but there's massive structures up and down 33, up and down 33. No farmlands are gone. It's all, and I used to say to my son 10 years ago, I said to him, look at property down in Wilson, outside of Nazareth. Now you couldn't buy anything down there. It's all gone. Nazareth, and I'm not in the banking business, but I do work with banks. And everybody's just dying to get down there in the Allentown area. And 10 years ago, everybody was getting out of there. It's all redevelopment. That's all it is down there, it's redevelopment. It's building the cities up. So I think we need to identify and set some goals if we're going to help the county out. Yeah, we're a tool. Last year we were a tool for the tax revenue. This year we're going to be a tool for a lease revenue. And I think we can be better tools than that.
It does demonstrate, though, the value of the authority and our ability to help the county. And Kev, talking about some of those things that you just referenced, our primary goal, so goals are important because you need to measure. And I believe primarily we're going to be interested in land use and land use development, which is why the Planning Commission is so important. But you mentioned, as you talk about 33, I think one of the major developments is the warehousing aspect that, of course, we have a significant amount of here. But I believe that the newly elected commissioners, okay, representing a younger demographic, fully understand the need to develop higher paying, family sustaining jobs with AI and informational technologies. And I do believe, though, that this authority can also be helpful in pursuing and assisting in some of the developments of that nature, along with the Chamber and our other partners. So there are opportunities, Kev, and I think we can be part of that.
And the fact that Aaron's sitting here, and Jack with the wealth of knowledge that he has, but Aaron with the Chamber of Commerce, and I think we had the conversation that Bob's not interested in more warehousing with low-paying jobs.
Well, the SLIPCO board has made a decision that with the remaining land owned by SLIPCO, we're going to be pursuing different sectors. Sectors in the food industry and the bio industry. There are others in our area, developers who are now doing distribution centers where they weren't in the past, so we did it. Now that others are doing it, we're looking for different opportunities with the land that we have remaining. So yes.
And if I could also add, given the fact that I know in my small time here, we've, joined the chamber in a memorandum of agreement through the commissioners' public meetings to work much more closely together. And the reasoning for that is, to have a lot of entities in one county or neighboring counties and everybody's looking to do the same work and sort of tripping over each other, we thought it would be much more beneficial to, bring the powers that be together and do the work together. So I know even from the commissioner's standpoint, I don't think if a warehouse was interested in coming here and providing jobs that we would necessarily turn them away. But I don't think that is any longer what we're seeking out when there's so many additional and so many greater opportunities for us to be going after with the remaining land that that is had, which is getting smaller and smaller throughout the county. So.
And the chamber and SLIPCO still work very closely with the other developers in the community who are interested in distribution. We're simply saying that with the land that we still own, we're not pursuing that.
The word AI was just thrown out. And I think there was a comic by our local brag. I'm not going to call it a newspaper, but and it was in regards to what Senator Flynn had to say, and I'll use his, Senator Marty Flynn about flying cars. And he wanted to get in front of it, and they laughed at him. That's something you're going to need to get in front of. That is the future. That is the future. And you can bring something like that up into little old Scranton, PA, or Lackawanna County. You bring, a development up or a study. Somebody popped their head in. That'd be, because that is the future. The Jetsons are here.
I'm so sorry. I have to excuse myself. I'm due at a 2 o'clock hearing.
Are we that long? You're late?
Yes, I am. I'm 5 minutes late.
All right, well, we're just chatting at this point, I think. But,
I can't say, though, I want to go back to what you said about goals. So the goals may be a little elusive. And I think with Kristen, we will certainly carve out, just like Dave said, at future meetings, we'll have more substantive information on some goals. But I think in going back to the comments that I made to start the meeting, the idea of the large projects like Montage, but the smaller projects in the municipalities, the point that I was trying to make there is we'd like to hear from them. We'd like to hear from local officials what the needs are in their community. We don't need to pursue just what we think they should be doing or just what we want to achieve. I think we'd want to know what some of the needs are in those municipalities and see if we can't help to assist if they involve the mission that we're participating in, that we can help them to address those issues. So again, it's somewhat of a ground up. It's a groundswell.
oh, when you said the mayor's, he's the economic development. Ask him if he knows that we're even out there to help him, what we can do for them. A friend of mine was looking at putting up a townhouse complex, and he was talking about the infrastructure. I said, you get to a certain dollar amount, I said, you come in and talk to us. And he, what? And I said, we can help with that. He said, you can help with the infrastructure. I said, we'll put the infrastructure and we'll help you with that. I said, it's called a TIF. And he had no idea. This is a very successful man.
Infrastructure is one of the key components that this authority can provide.
And, through our TIF program. So there's things that we do that townships don't even know that we do. And
And Kev, to that end, with the discussions I've had with Kristen, is that we will be conducting outreach to those communities to be sure that if they're not aware of the things that we can do to assist them, we'll make them aware of it.
Those meetings are actually starting in October, where we kicked off sort of a large public meeting at the 911 center a few months ago. And we also streamed it live. So all the municipalities across the entire county got to not only know the economic development team, but also what they do. And then what we will be doing in the month of October is holding meetings with, clusters at a time of municipalities to have more intimate conversations on what are their needs, what projects do they see, what's their wish list versus, their needs, and, how could we address a little bit of both. And also, our CDBG program goes out and has to do needs assessment for projects that, may fall under monies that can be used through CDBG. But sometimes if some of those needs don't fall under that program and are not eligible for CDBG, there may be opportunities for us. So I think one of the things that's probably going to be key here, especially for myself and Joe, is not only our consistent communication, which we've already begun to schedule, is also making sure that we're going back and forth with all of the information of all these tools, right? And there's so many more. We've named barely a handful that exist right down the hall that can really help support the efforts of the Redevelopment Authority, and again, act as tools. But certainly when we start identifying some goals, and I'm sure myself and Joe would be happy to take a first sort of crack at, some drafts and then, pass them around to all of you folks and see if you think that goal aligns or change things or take red pens to it so we can do it collaboratively. And then go from there. But the good news is down the hall, we have a lot of tools and resources that can help prop up some of those goals. So I think it's an exciting time. So thank you all.
all right. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it. We have a resolution. We have an acting director that we're going to appoint to a full-time non-paid position. Not so, but anyway, I have a resolution, and it's Resolution 1145-24, the Redevelopment Authority of County of Lackawanna. The resolution is approving the appointment of Kristen Magnana as the executive director. I'm not going to read throughout the whole resolution, but I'd like to have a vote that as of today, Kristen will become our director. Can I have a motion to approve Resolution 1145-24?
Jack McNulty, I would so move.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
We have the. Yeah, I usually move them to the first. And we've actually have been, item number 9 is other business and open discussion, and I think we've been having that all along throughout the whole meeting. So with that, if we have nothing else good for the order, I'd like to thank everybody for coming today. We'll chastise Tim for not showing up or calling in. And I make a motion that we adjourn our meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
So moved.
Thank you.
Thank you.